Hi, everyone. Welcome to our live interview today, and thank you for joining us. It's great to see leaders tuning in from across regions, sectors, and disciplines. My name is Bhuva Shakti. I'm the Chief AI Ethics and Global Culture Officer at Women in AI. Women in AI is a global nonprofit working to advance inclusive leadership, responsible innovation, and ethical governance in artificial intelligence. We are a team of volunteers spread across 170 plus countries, and I cannot do what I do without my team's support every single day. In my role as the Chief AI Ethics and Global Culture Officer at Women in AI, I focus on the intersection of ethics, culture, leadership, accountability globally. Across every country we operate, much of my work centers on helping corporations and C suite leaders navigate AI transformation, and even when AI is not their core business. And we support startups in embedding governance, risk, and compliance early. So AI readiness is built in from the start. I see firsthand how ethical AI decisions are shaped as much by culture and judgment as by technology. I'm delighted to be joined today by Anna Jibgashvili, the founder and principal of Foundeon. It's an advisory firm dedicated to helping enterprises scale AI responsibly while maintaining ownership of their institutional identity, operating logic, governance standards, proprietary methodologies, and accountability. Anna believes that sovereignty, preserving AI transformation, begins by making enterprise owned logic explicit before it is inferred by tools, fragmented across systems, or absorbed into vendor platforms. I titled our conversation today as From AI Ethics to AI Accountability and How Human Oversight Plays a Role into it. As AI moves from experimentation into enterprise wide adoption, another challenge is becoming increasingly urgent. How do organizations ensure that responsibility does not disappear as automation scales? Ethical principles are being established, governance frameworks are being developed, and AI capabilities continue to advance, yet, accountability often remains difficult to measure, audit, and operationalize in real world workflows. Today's discussion is about understanding that challenge and what it takes to build the foundations, oversight mechanisms, and decision making structures that keep humans accountable as AI becomes more embedded in how organizations operate. Let's get started. Hey, Anna, welcome.
Hi, Bova. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be here and speaking with you. Let me first express how much appreciation and respect I have for the work that Women in AI is doing, and especially with you having listened to a couple of your initiatives and the conversations. I have huge respect for the work you guys are doing. So
Thank you so much, Anna. I mean, we are so honored to have you as well and learn from your expertise. Can you briefly introduce yourself and share what led you to focus on enterprise AI transformation, governance, and digital identity?
I come from the background of data, product governance, and platform transformation. So I've been long enough into the corporations, primarily in fintech and a couple of years in insurance, large Fortune 500 companies where we had to go through multiple times through different types of transformations. And because I come from that background, my thinking mind, when we started, on this road of AI transformation, went to how does it become operational? So when I started thinking about how this work gets done, who makes those decisions, how do we redesign ourselves? Because AI is supposed to help us automation. We've done several times this type of transformations. So that curiosity became a pattern that I started noticing that I could not ignore. When I looked at how technology acquisitions were acquiring additional capabilities and features to enable themselves to consume digitally and digitally translate existing enterprise identities through their data, I felt like it was an interesting trend that I was observing, and started thinking and developing the frameworks to ensure that organization, first of all, understands itself and makes itself machine readable, and then owns that space so that it can allow the AI tool to use the AI tool itself, as opposed to being used by and consumed by AI tools. We'll talk more about it later, but hopefully it kind of describes where my head is. Through Foundeon, I focus on helping organizations to take ownership, as you described, over their digital identities, which I put into like 6 separate primitives. It's a lot of work, but it's foundational work. If we want to do
Yeah.
transformation, we have to do it from ground up.
Yeah, exactly. So I work with corporations also on AI transformation initiatives. Everyone has a strategy and vision, but actually executing it to scale and also being robust for the long term is the challenge today,
Yes.
right?
And
Yeah. So
giving the step by step, where do you start? How do you move? How do you identify? Not everything has to become agentic, right? So right
yeah,
now, we don't think that way.
yeah, exactly. We don't want to start on something because it's the trend, right? We want to do something that's right for our organization and also aligns with our mission and values for our stakeholders, be it investors,
Make
clients, and so on.
sustainable. Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So, where do you think the AI conversation, especially from an ethics perspective, is today compared to, let's say, 2 or 3 years ago? In the last 2, 3 years, there are so many changes, but this is the time for us to also think about AI ethics more deeply, right?
Right. I mean, you're an expert, but from my perspective, I can tell you from 2 years ago, the conversation was about the bias that we found in a model outcome, some fairness, transparency, how things are done. We couldn't explain the outcome and so forth. And I feel like we've moved from the individual model outcome into how do we operationalize ethics. Now we have very good, across the world, organizations are trying to document policies that help us to implement AI ethics, but now it's time to operationalize it. So I think the conversation maybe is not yet there, but now we are facing the fact that AI ethics needs to be, first of all, operationalized, and then there needs to be ownership and the regulations that enforce those ethics somehow, so that we can implement AI safely and responsibly.
Yeah, I mean, the last few weeks, there have been so many instances, even with Claude and other things going on. So now everyone is thinking about, okay, we need regulations, but how can we do it more efficiently so
Yeah.
that we are not, blocked with innovation?
That's
So,
exactly what my effort is as well. How exactly you will implement anything unless you design that implementation, as opposed to let the technical tool to translate your meaning and design whatever they are trying to design through those tools. Like we, organizations, individuals, are responsible for the implementation.
yeah, exactly. Now, what are the biggest shifts you are seeing globally in AI ethics? We are midway into 2026. What do we see between 2026 and even 2027 that's coming up?
Oh, that's a very good question. Um, Let me think about it. I think the shift that I'm seeing is, as I said, from AI ethics are policies, right? It tells us what is good and what harms we need to avoid. And we have so many organizations that are formulating it in a very clear and meaningful way. Now, the shift is, and maybe the conversation already has started, how are we going to implement and enforce those policies? That's one. The second shift is, I think we started realizing the human in the loop. It does not
Mm,
mean human approving what model output they received or got escalated to the human. Human in the loop is completely needs to be redefined, in my opinion. Human is the entire loop designer for what AI is supposed to do within the workflow that used to be not agentic, right? So human is the designer of the ethics implementation of the guardrails, decisions, and what AI agent can take so that we have a better outcome. We have a sustainable growth and scalable growth and trustworthy results. There is an issue, a shift that we trust it less and less, right?
Yeah.
Very recently, I probably wouldn't have said this last week, but I've done very deep dive analytics about the truth. What are we seeing in terms of the context? The human should be able to digest the context. Amount of a flood of context that is being currently created is physically impossible to be controlled or observed by human being. It's physically impossible. The reason is that not only that we create the content by AI, we are also creating the content about the content. We create descriptions, create summaries. We have AI working everywhere. So the content is being created for the machine to digest, summarize, and create another content out of it. Where is the human there? So where is the truth? So farther you go from the source where the content is created, harder it will be to confirm the legitimacy of that truth and the source. So that's a huge pose for me at the moment when I realized that the flood of, yes, let everybody use the AI and create the content, but when we are being responsible, where is the truth would be the one item that I hope everybody focuses on. All this amount of AI created content. Where are we going to find the truth in it? How are we going to implement ethics? What is the source of the truth? So I feel like there needs to be maybe the companies who are producing those policies also start focusing on one of the topics that would be mask or label everything that's synthetic or AI created. I don't know. That's something that really, really bothers me. That recently I kind of did the analytics and I said, maybe that's the most important thing for 2027.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you rightly said for the last few years, humans in the loop has been going around as a term, but not necessarily really implemented. And especially now you clarified for us, it's not humans in the loop, but humans are the loop, right? We have to be involved in every step of the process, but not necessarily, of course, minimizing the efficiency of AI because it's there to help us, but
Yeah.
also for our own mission and values, not necessarily creating summaries, feeding it to machine, and then creating more summaries. We lose the sense of where the truth actually is, right?
Yes, exactly. Thank you for bringing it back.
Yeah. Now, if you had to name the need of the hour for AI ethics in, let's say, for the remaining part of 2026 and for 2027, what would it be? We know what are the shifts, what are the challenges, but what do we need?
Honestly, I think that we need regulations and some kind of an enforcement, some kind of a control that would ensure that all the good work that AI ethics organizations are doing are actually being implemented. Because as I said, we are losing the ability, physical ability for the observatory ability by the human or even the machine. It's too much and it's too vague. So we are going to lose our handle on ethics if we don't start implementing and enforcing. What I mean by that, it's regulations. I think it's super important.
Yeah, I know. Like sometimes what happens when we are talking about enterprise transformation, people think governance and compliance are some things that kind of take time away from going live. But why do you think governance and regulations before deployment is so important especially when AI moves from pilots into live enterprise workflows. Like, explain to us when people think, okay, it's wasting our time, but how is it going to save them time later on after we go live?
Um, I look at governance and regulation slightly differently, though, right? So, in terms of the pre-AI era, yes, definitely, it kind of took time. We had to wait when we did the implementation for the policy to be written or by being approved by compliance. When we had the deployment, and we're like very uneasy, right? So we
Yeah,
hated that part of our product development or any kind of development, but it was necessary and it kind of protected us, right? But now, as I said, because of the speed and efficiencies AI introduces into our workflows, the governance cannot start at the end or applied at the end. So it's just like the human needs to be at the start of the loop, being a designer, being a defining factor, what goes into the AI and creating the human driven outcome requirements, and then giving the AI guardrails where and what is the scope of that workflow, because we are replacing the workflows, right? So just the same
yeah,
way, governance must start and follow through the entire process. It's different. The governance today, when we have AI into our workflows, must be runtime. And that's something that we don't currently have. We have governance in different parts. So we have like a cybersecurity related, like towards PII. So what we have entitlements, RBOC. We have different parts of the entire process, have different types of governance, but there is no end-to-end governance which AI requires. If you put AI into workflow, your governance must be runtime, because it cannot be after the fact, or it cannot be written at the beginning of the process.
yeah, and it has to be runtime because there are so many moving parts in the entire workflow. So we have to ensure everything is implemented correctly and obviously with regulations as well, right?
Right,
Now,
right. There are so many like a new organizations that I got to know while working on Foundeon, that try to record all of the regulations, all of the policies, but those are very rich libraries. However, we still have to inside the organization, we still have to write the process that consults with those regulations and libraries.
yeah, exactly. Now, what are companies still misunderstanding about responsible AI adoption? There's governance, there's compliance, there is entire thing about pilots to live workflows, but still they are struggling, right? So
Yeah.
what's happening with this?
Um, it's sad to see how much effort went into this AI implementation that
Mm,
you don't see the ROI. Like when I looked at any ROI related news, and when you drill down to it, they just calculate number of hours people used the tool, or how many people accessed the tool, how many times in a week. That's not ROI. What I
yeah,
think is happening, what organizations must realize, that in order to really truly transform your organization, you have to measure the right thing, which is how many workflows you implemented agentic processes in, how many new roles you've created to support those new workflows, because humans are need to have a skill set to enable them to observe the outcomes, make sure that the guardrails are appropriately applied, and when the agentic outcome is escalates to the human needs to have a context. What is it about, where it's coming from, what the workflow is supposed to do. So there is going to be new roles that required. So have we created any new roles specifically for the new workflows that your organization implemented? I don't see a right measures at all published anywhere, which means that we are not doing the right way transformation. So from this point on, I think organizations will realize we are not doing AI transformation, we are doing adoption, whatever the adoption is.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when it comes to transformation, especially if you are a public facing corporation, you're responsible to showcase ROI. If you're just calculating number of hours in and out, it's not really ROI. You're basically doing a, tactical calculation to get by for a couple of months, but it's not going to be long term and sustainable, right?
And the way we operated before, it should be outcome driven. What
Yeah.
outcome did you get from all of that implementation efforts that you have been, trying to implement through the year or well, two, last year or two? So I feel like if we just understand that we are human, that are responsible for any outcome and any decisions, any design of our own internal organizational workflows, then the conversation comes, how do we transform and design new workflows and use AI as a tool, as opposed to let AI as a tool read all of my content and come up with something that I might find it useful.
Yeah, I know. You also often talk about the need for enterprises to become legible to themselves before AI can safely execute, right? What
Yeah.
does it mean? What does it mean by being legible to themselves?
So again, what we are seeing, what I was seeing in terms of, I mentioned earlier the technical acquisitions. So we have ton of data, and this data
Mm,
sits in multiple different layers in our organization, in legacy systems, in some semi-modern systems, or in cloud or somewhere. So what we are seeing, that in order for AI to work, it needs to read the data and do something about it. So what we started seeing, organizations started developing this data products as to supply the data to the AI as it needs. But what we did not do is to understand what data meaning was given to the agent. So AI agent could translate and assign the meaning based on their knowledge, however they were trained. What I say is that let's assign the meaning ourselves. We as an individual institution know better who we are, what makes us different, what policies do we implement internally, what is our cross-functional dependencies are, what lines I cannot cross when I need to escalate to a different person or organization, how my dependencies are negotiated in the trade-offs when there is different priorities inside the organization. All of that needs to be documented through something that I call digital substrate identity layer. And
yeah,
this is not an easy or sexy job, but it's totally doable. I believe that we have brilliant people working in all of the organizations who, if we explain them accurately, that there is an initiative that we want to make things more efficient, they'll help us to create those. To create the substrate, identity substrate, and help the AI agents to consume our own meaning that we define, not that what they assign to our data, so that our identity through our own definition processes processed by AI tools still stays our identity, as opposed to, imagine when you have all the AI tools working with multiple different data and have the same type of translation, create knowledge graphs, they have their own semantic meanings, then at some point the outcome will be the same, right?
yeah, exactly. I mean, there is so much data. We need to clearly define what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. But also, you bring up a very good point. Instead of letting the machine understand its own values and mission of what the organization is about, we need to teach it that
Yeah,
it understands what we believe in and what we want as outcome driven systems, right?
Right. So I believe it. Like, but jumping into something new technology, I'm super excited. I worked until 3 a.m. last night, was trying to create another agent for something that I'm really, involved into, like passionately involved into that agent. But that does not mean that we have to just let the agent run our lives, right? So we've seen the results, especially if you're an institution responsible for your own outcome, responsible for how you treat your customers, responsible um, in, in face of SEC and all the other regulations. You have to take also ownership over what you are providing to the tool to do for
Yeah,
it. Just
yeah,
be more efficient, incorporate the specific and I'm trying to find the word, like deliberately design the workflow, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
even internally, we have different departments have a different definitions of the same thing. For example, the customer could be, like, the active customer could be one thing in another organization area, and in another organization could be something else, right? So you might be looking at, if you are in terms of this support and looking at the transaction, if your customer has not used that account in 1 month, for you it's an inactive customer, but for the another organization, for maybe the marketing, it's an active customer. So
yeah.
those definitions are there, it's organic, but it's our obligation as an institution to design it in a way that we want AI to understand.
Yeah, I mean, we need to be deliberate before thinking that AI is not producing the outcomes that we want if we have not fed it deliberately, right? And also federated design, like you mentioned, right? What works for one business unit may not be for others, and vice versa, depending on the context and timing. So, constant communication between teams and leadership is also very essential. Now,
Absolutely.
you also,
It forces us to document that.
yeah, exactly. But you also talk about trusted data foundations, decision rights, and accountability as very much a central point for responsible AI, right? So, what does this mean? What is a trusted data foundation, and how does decision rights and accountability come into picture?
Oh, um, that's the big topic. I'm going to try to keep it very short, though. The trust data foundations means that whatever the data, I look at this through the data products lenses, for example. So whatever the data product you create, inside what you put inside the data product, it needs to have a clear meaning, semantic meaning that you approve as an organization. It needs to have ownership, because if anything goes wrong or anything needs to be changed, you have an owner and the responsible person for the data quality. So I include into that definition the source data quality, as well as understanding how are you sharing your data in terms of who is the producer and the consumer of the data, so that set up the expectations, and who changes, adjusts, or summarize the data, what are the requirements around it. So I think the trusted foundations mean that your data is a single source of truth across the enterprise, and we all agree on what it represents.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there is also so much discussion about human oversight. Sometimes, like the earlier thing we talked about, humans in the loop, humans are the loop. Now, human oversight terminology is becoming more symbolic, right? So, what does it mean for human oversight to be like really human oversight instead of just being a symbolic term that organizations use?
In For me to implement human oversight, it means that we are implementing human designed workflows and
Mhm.
utilizing in that workflows AI for efficiency perspective. So for efficiency needs, we're gonna have to start it. You don't have to start it from everywhere at once. I would take one workflow and ensure that I understand entire end-to-end inside the workflow where I could add efficiency by utilizing AI tool. What does human oversight would mean? It would be operationally where the responsibility starts. Who is the owner of the input? As I said, trusted foundations have an owner, right? And then outcome of that agent has also should have an owner, which is a human as well. In terms of entire process or anything in between, anytime we have a case of agent making a decision, that decision is also defined by a human that says, hey, agent, this is the scope of the workflow you are allowed to work within, and those are the decisions that you can make. I personally am for transformation. Utilize the AI tool, but let the human describe what is the acceptable outcome is. So the decision in terms of the human oversight, human is overseeing the entire process end to end, and is responsible as well for inputs and outputs and outcomes as well. So the AI becomes a tool.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you need not be physically doing something in the loop, rather, you're overseeing the design, what happens to the outcome, what are the decisions. And then you may not be in the loop, but then you have defined the overall loop and you are providing oversight on the outcomes, right? So that's actually very, very interesting because many organizations do not do that yet. Many organizations seem to try that, but then they have not been successful at scale. But you also focus on preserving institutional identity as organizations scale AI, right? So, what does institutional identity mean in this context, especially when organizations want to scale it?
Yes, so this is again, it's going to take an effort, but as I described, to take a one workflow and understand what it means to do the AI transformation within that one workflow. See, maybe that's not necessary to do the AI transformation, especially with organizations that are 40 years or older. We have
Yeah,
processes that could be easily automated. We have processes that are manual. Those things, like I would initially take an inventory of all of your workflows within your organization and see which one of them are candidate for automation. Maybe I don't need an agent. And there's going to be processes that you can think of, oh, the agent probably would be adding, freeing my like 100 hours per week if I have some automation do this workflow for me. So initially I would say, look at the everything that you're currently doing as an organization or the part of organization, and identify the opportunities where you have the highest outcome ROI through
yeah,
if you implement the automation, right? So then if you do that, you cannot just create, as I said, there's everything has to happen as a package. What I say, create ownership, responsible person who gives you the good data, right data. Has this data been certified? Is it governed? Is it semantically reflecting what your institution believes in? Is it creating the calculations? Do you have a check for the bias, or is it giving you the outcome you expect? All of that needs to be designed at least in one workflow, and you can easily see, you can build up from that point on. For example, I'll give you one quick example. So if we create
yeah,
the foundational data product that supports, for example, one workflow, within the foundational data products, as I said, we have ownership, we have clean data, we have to put an effort into that data product. Once we create a different data product, the data product two, what's going to happen is, in order to scale, what I would recommend doing, and I've done, look at critical data elements, how they are related. Are they reflecting the enterprise level semantic meaning so that you can utilize two data products in one agent if it's needed to be. If it's not, then you have a conflict. You can't scale, right? So it's
Yeah,
very
yeah,
easy to
exactly.
identify this type of conflicts through the intentional building.
Yeah, I mean, start small with the highest ROI, get quick wins, and then scale only in those areas where you really see a high uh, ROI plus also a quick win, right? You don't have to do everything together or at the same time and kind of cut corners on the important things in terms of
The
scalability and
important thing
robustness.
would be your quality, your
Yeah,
relationships between cross-functionally, your decisions. Like you have to know what decisions your AI can take and cannot take. And if it's
yeah,
using the departments, what is the trade-off? Who is responsible for approving something that AI will give it as an outcome? So it's intentional design, basically.
yeah, exactly. Now, when organizations want to go on this journey, sometimes, they are not able to do everything by themselves. Sometimes they want to use some external vendor tools or models or things like that, right? What would you recommend? Let's say, how can organizations avoid outsourcing their operating logic to these external vendors or models they do not fully understand? I mean, how can we still leverage some of the tools and models available, but not, outsource important things?
Um, yes, of course. I mean, you're absolutely right. This is impossible to for the large organization to do it on their own. But there
Yeah,
is, I actually have a question here. I might share it with you. What to ask vendor when you want to
yeah,
maintain your digital identity ownership. What I would do still that ensure that as an organization you understand what's meaning ownership means, your digital identity ownership means, and ask that vendor to help you to do that on your own terms. So vendor, in order to create the knowledge graphs, there is no vendor that tells you who you are. It's your
yeah,
responsibility, right? What vendors would help you to look at your data in anywhere it is, like it doesn't matter if it's in your legacy system somewhere or in cloud, they'll try to connect and create the knowledge graphs and tell you this is how your data might be related or connected. What is your responsibility is to give the vendor your own meaning, definitions, policies, but ensure that it's internally saved. So when we're talking about sovereignty is not the cloud. Sovereignty is that you own your own meaning. That knowledge graph, if the vendor is helping you to connect your data points to create your foundational data products, that needs to stay with you. If the vendor is there to help you to create a knowledge graph and then stay with you to you cannot create or add more data sources without the vendor to be used, then I would be very careful because, as I said, all of the acquisitions kind of drive the institutions to leak their digital identity. And I would definitely work with a vendor who will help me to create the knowledge graphs that I need to understand who am I digitally, if I need to do that from the ecosystem perspective, but keep it internal, own it.
yeah, yeah, exactly. It's not about sovereignty in the cloud or my data, but it's more about the meaning, my identity, and the things that I can own as an organization and I should own, while the vendor is going to support with any peripheral aspects. Then that's a good partnership where you can still own your identity, but also scale a little bit farther with support of additional tools and models, right?
And there are those ethical vendors out there. Definitely,
Mm.
there are very smart, brilliant startups that I've got to know all of this last year that actually are doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I talk to so many startups also that have AI ethics as a non-compromisable aspect of our solution when
Yeah.
they're fundraising, talking to investors, right? So that's really great to understand. But when it comes to organizations, what is one practical step every organization can take this year? We have like 6 more months left in this year. to strengthen their responsible AI adoption?
Oh, gosh, that's that's a question, right? I would, what I would say for the leaders of any organization, first of all, we need to understand this. AI is an amazing tool. It's an enabler. It can help you to excel to the ways that you cannot imagine, right? So, but it's also the tool that would, eventually decide your future. So what I
Yeah.
want the leaders to understand is think, first of all, you have three ways to incorporate AI. One is to completely give away your digital identity and get consumed by AI tools, right? The second is, which is totally possible, and some people might want to do it. The second is the hybrid, which is not scalable that much, but you might be more comfortable with that. You want to implement something very fast. You don't mind that tool is, translating and creating their own meaning for your data, but for the certain areas, like you have lots of transactional data and you want to do like process claims very fast, for example. That's hybrid, but the primary, some other parts of the organization stays as is, which means that you're not going to scale that much, but you are in the hybrid, you're still dependent on the tool. That also needs to be understood by leadership. The third thing is that for the leadership to understand, there is a sovereignty path. You can intentionally design your future starting from today to say that this is how I want AI to be used as a tool in my organization. And that's the path where I see organizations who do truly foundationally transformation, not adoption. I'm not using that word. If you do truly transformation, there is an amazing exponential growth opportunity, either in efficiencies or how you can acquire more markets or grow your footprint if you're able to do more.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, today is the day, right? You
Yeah.
can start even today, but then there are these boards and executive leadership teams that always want to, call for a big strategy discussion, work on it for months before they get started. So, what role should some of the boards and executive leadership teams play in AI accountability if we want to start small today? And where do you see the biggest governance gaps for them to get started?
The In terms of the boards, I see a board as the vision setter, right? So
Yeah,
the
yeah.
vision for the organization, and then ensure that people in your organization understand the future. What is the future? What you are bringing in when you bring AI tool in the organization as the future state. So is your goal to cover more territories? Is your goal to be more efficient and have more dividends uh,
Yeah.
and or you want to process more transactions? What is the goal? So the high level, I probably did give you examples at the high level board level views, but the board needs to set the vision for the future of the organization. And then the below the board is to for the leadership, the strategic leadership to try to implement that vision through intentional redesigning of the current processes. As I said, not everything's going to be automated or agentic initially. Take your time, take your steps, but it's not going to take enormous amount. We have AI, we can use it to record our meeting minutes and make decisions faster, right? So there are frameworks that you and I probably have implemented already into our daily lives that we can apply to make decisions faster for the transformation. And then biggest gap would be to ensure that we need to understand that governance and AI is no longer that siloed different divisions inside the organization. So something that does marketing, another organization part does the revenue brings through client acquisitions. It's kind of no longer a space. We need to understand organizations need to internally completely redesign how they are bringing revenues in. And then what are the processes, current processes that need to be slowly changed, adjusted, and redesigned to utilize AI tools to make them more efficient. So that's basically where I would start if I was the strategic leader. But again, keep in mind that AI today is not, we are not trusting. We're not trusting as a humans about how outcomes, and we don't trust that it's not going to take our jobs. That's not the case. If we intentionally redesign the work, we're going to design many new AI relevant roles that we will need in the future. So let's start today, right? And
Yeah,
then
no, exactly.
I think
Yeah,
governance
both.
is a process.
Yeah, exactly. So both are setting the vision, but then we are supposed to execute it, but then don't try to just go ahead and execute it. Take a step back, intentionally redesign your processes, find out where it's relevant, where it has the highest ROI, right? Now, AI agents are becoming more autonomous. So, how should organizations rethink accountability, escalation paths, and human decision making authority?
So, in terms of the autonomous agents, I feel like maybe the large organizations are not ready for it, right?
Mm.
Because we have not designed runtime governance that does true runtime governance from end to end. Unless there is some case scenario that I don't know of, there is none today. So what I would say, yes, do it in a sandbox. Make sure that you trust the outcome. Make sure you have an owner who is responsible, because we are responsible for the outcome, regardless it's done by human or the agent. So as an organization, we need to take responsibility what is happening inside our organization, regardless how it's been done, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I understand that, then we will try to find an accountability structure around the autonomous agent.
Yeah, I mean, accountability structure is really, really very important. Now, let's say looking ahead to 2027, I'm starting today, I'm doing something, let's say piloting in my sandbox, let's say rest of 2026. But as we go into 27 and beyond, what will distinguish organizations that successfully scale AI responsibly from those that struggle with trust, governance, and adoption?
That's in my wheelhouse. Ownership. Own your own
Yeah.
digital identity. Keep yourself differentiated from others.
Mm,
Manage and own what makes you different. For example, we have two different banks. One treats the customers one way and calculates the rates, credit scores one way on credit scores and probably standard, but how do you trust your or manage your customer relationships is something
mm,
that's proprietary for you. Maybe there are some perks that you have for the customer when they achieve, let's say, like they are being with you for 5 years. There's some special thing that you do for them, something that makes you slightly different, right? We do have to, that's a competitive advantage that we need to maintain in order to continue exist. And the only way to do that, if you own that your digital identity. That's how
And
I.
it's not about prioritizing ethics and responsible AI. It's really about the survival of the organization itself, right? For you to be successful and sustainable with good ROI in the long term, you have to start
Yes,
today.
but I
Yeah,
feel like I missed the point. Thank you so much, Bua, to mentioning that. I don't think any organization will survive without being ethical, right?
yeah, yeah,
I do believe that, yes, there is a concentration of power, in certain places, right? But
Yeah,
we as humans, we care about each other, right? So
yeah,
we feel like, I think, I strongly believe that unethical organizations that do not put the ethics, AI ethics, at the forefront of their AI transformation will not survive in the long term.
yeah. I mean, I so very much agree with that. I'm 100% with you on that. And we are also kind of coming up time. Is there anything you want to share? Any last words? Any last advice for our community?
Um, I don't know if I can, be so brave to say this is my advice. Take everyone, but I definitely want everybody to understand the one thing: AI is an amazing technology. However, if we are not mindful, how are we using it, and what the AI is doing today to our truth of existence, and really question all of that flood of content it's being produced, and not initiate individual from everybody's standpoint. Like, I'm signing every petition that I see about, let's label data properly. If it's synthetic, label it, because we are losing a handle on what is truth, and we don't
Hmm.
want this to happen. Every one of us, as an organization and as an individual, we need to take a responsibility over what AI is doing today, and how it will impact the future. I don't think that AI can be blamed for our own decisions. I think I recently wrote something and then changed the title, "Don't Blame AI," because decisions are made by human. So
Yeah.
let's take responsibility to create and implement sustainably and ethically everything that's happening with our new technology.
Yeah, I mean, so true. I mean, I'm so much aligned with that. And also, thank you so much for taking time sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you, Bo. I really appreciate you.
Thanks everyone for spending your time with us today also. So I appreciate the thoughtful perspectives shared by Anna. If you'd like to continue the discussion, feel free to connect with either of us on LinkedIn. We are always happy to engage offline, respond to questions. If you have any suggestions, feel free to share with us. If you have suggestions for any topics or voices you'd like to see featured, feel free to ping me also. So I host these Women in AI conversations once a month, bringing together global experts on ethical AI, culture, policy, and leadership. Please keep an eye out for next month's topic and guest, and do sign up when registrations open up. Thank you again for joining us and for being part of this global dialogue. Thanks so much again, Anna, for taking time to share your expertise with us.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you.